Hi there, my name is Mwai. I'm a pastor with Christ is the Answer Ministries here in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. We began a conversation in our last broadcast, and the conversation is entitled The Perils and Triumphs of Giftedness. And as we began this conversation, we tried to define what is giftedness from a biblical point of view, from a biblical perspective. And we discovered that giftedness is that precious endowment of potentially outstanding abilities, which allows a person to interact with an environment with remarkably high levels of achievement and creativity. Let me just repeat that. Giftedness is that precious endowment of potentially outstanding abilities, which allows a person to interact with the environment with remarkably high levels of achievement and creativity. And this broadcast is especially for those of you who God has gifted in one way or the other, gifted in several ways, and you just can't help it. This is just who you are, is how God made you. You come into an environment, you come into a church, you come into a workplace, and certain gifts just seem to take center stage, and you're able to do certain things. Actually, for a gifted person, certain things that other people may struggle with, for a gifted person, some of those things just come so naturally. I mean, they just ooze out of you. An area that everybody else is struggling with, you just come in and you're able to offer solutions because you are gifted. And another way of looking at giftedness is that you are anointed to do certain things. And that giftedness can be in areas such as leadership. You're just anointed to lead, or administration, or just intellectual giftedness. You're just able to think through certain things, formulate certain ideas. For some people, for many people, you find that musically they have a musical genius in them, or they're just able to create things. And in our last broadcast, we looked at some of those characteristics, and especially the triumphs of being gifted. But we need to flip the coin. We need to look at the other side of the coin, because the picture is not complete until you look at both sides of the same coin. And today we want to look at the perils of giftedness. Now, in our last broadcast also, we looked at a few characters in the Bible that were obviously very gifted. People like David in the Old Testament, people like Joseph in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, we looked at the Apostle Paul. And you'll also find that gifted people tend to have, a number of areas where they're gifted in. There's a multiplicity of giftedness in them, even as we looked at some of those characters. So let's look at some of the perils. What are the perils of giftedness? Because giftedness comes with certain perils. Number one, gifted people are highly misunderstood. Gifted people are highly misunderstood. You see that in the biblical characters. One of the things, like for the Apostle Paul, not the Apostle Paul, but David in the Old Testament was one of the most misunderstood characters. When you read a lot of the Psalms that he wrote, a lot of times he's in agony, he's in lament, because there's so many enemies and people have misunderstood him. Or even the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, you find that everywhere he went, he caused trouble and people misunderstood him. They said all manner of things. They called him a babbler, and they said he was bringing interesting philosophies, and people, even the church itself, the people he was supposed to serve with, sometimes they misunderstood him. Gifted people are highly misunderstood. People think that they understand them, but they actually don't. And everybody is trying to figure you out because you're gifted. Number two, gifted people tend to be easy targets of hate and ridicule. You see that also in the biblical characters. You see that in real life. You become an easy target of hate, people ridiculing you. Some people will hate you just because of hate. They don't know why they hate you, but they just hate you. They don't like you. You're not likable. But it's because there's a gifting, there's an anointing inside of you. And I think it's something that you will discover that giftedness attracts a lot of hate. Number three is that gifted people tend to be perceived to be a big threat wherever they go. Wherever they are, you suddenly become a threat. Suddenly people become uncomfortable with you, especially people who are used to the status quo. especially people who don't like change. Most of us don't like change. Wherever you come into a situation, people become a bit unsettled. They begin feeling insecure around you. You are a threat to them. Wherever the Apostle Paul went, I mean, he threatened the status quo. The religious leaders were always on his case. David, wherever he went, even when he was being pursued by King Saul, whenever he went even to foreign places, he was always a threat. In some places, they literally would have to kick him out, because gifted people sometimes can be a big threat. A lot of times tend to be a big threat. Number 4, gifted people are often attacked. They become objects of attacks from people, and are mainly due to envy and jealousy. Because you evoke jealousy in people, especially when you're a gifted person and there are certain things you are able to do and they come easily to you. And sometimes you tend to steal the spotlight simply because you are gifted. You don't steal the spotlight because you demand for it or because you manipulate your way through it. Giftedness attracts attention, and that attention comes with a lot of envy, a lot of jealousy. Reading the story of the Apostle Paul, wherever he went, one of the things that caused him to be hated so much and be attacked so much was because he came, not only threatened the status quo, but also the religious leaders were jealous about him. People will be jealous about you when you are gifted. Number 5, gifted people live with constant rejection. Rejection becomes their bread. They are rejected by family a lot of times. They are rejected by their peers. They are rejected by colleagues because people cannot simply understand. Are you there? And probably you have lived with such rejection from childhood. You never quite fit. Even within your own family, maybe in a big family among your siblings, you are always the odd one out. And you went to school, you're always the odd one out. You went to campus, you're always the odd one. You go to church, you're always the odd one out. In your workplace, you're always the odd one out. When people are being invited for a lunch, you're never even considered. There's always rejection, and many times it's because you are gifted. Number 6, gifted people often struggle, unfortunately, with deep depression and many times self-doubt. On the one hand, they can be very confident because of what they do. On the one hand, they shine. On the one hand, they are able to function. But on the other hand, on the other side of it, behind the scenes, sometimes they struggle with deep depression. They struggle with feelings of self-doubt, sometimes low self-esteem. It's amazing, even in contemporary times, you find some of the people that we so celebrate, maybe out there in Hollywood and what have you, many of them struggle with deep feelings of rejection. King David, if you read his Psalms and you get to hear his heart, many times, one time he will cry and say, "Why so downcast, O my soul?" He would lament. Why? Because gifted people sometimes struggle with a deep sense of depression and oppression within their very souls. And then finally, number 7, gifted people often fight deadly battles within and without. They are always fighting battles. The battles for survival. They find themselves trying to just stay afloat. When you think of the Apostle Paul, and his own testimony saying how he survived shipwrecks. He was stoned, left for dead. He will find himself hungry, starving, and many times he was cold and just trying to remain above water, just trying to remain alive so that he could fulfill what God had called him to do. Gifted people fight deadly battles. Some of those battles nobody knows about. Sometimes with gifted people, they may be smiling on the outside, but on the inside, they are crying tears. Oh, they shine, but on the inside, when nobody's around, they find themselves struggling and find themselves fighting and find themselves struggling just to wake up in the morning. I don't know whether this describes you. I don't know whether this talks to you. I don't know whether you identify yourself as a gifted person. But I want to encourage you, there are always two sides to this coin. There's perils, but there are also triumphs. And as we continue on this mini-series, and we'll be concluding in our next broadcast, we'll be looking now at this person who is gifted then. What am I supposed to do? Then how should I live my life? What are some of the things that I can incorporate in my own life so that at the end of the day, my triumphs as a gifted person outweigh the perils that I have to face on a daily basis? In the meantime, I want you to remember this, that if you are gifted, that gift does not belong to you, it belongs to God. And because it belongs to God, God will protect you because of the gift that is inside of you. No matter what you go through, if you are gifted, nobody can destroy you. The enemy cannot destroy you because of that gift. You're carrying something that is so precious on the inside. God will protect you because of the deposit that He has made on the inside of you. God bless you. My name is Mwai. Again, let's take this conversation to the next level in our next broadcast as we bring this series to a close. God bless you.